Hey guys, tonight we slip into the heart of a village where the stars feel so close you could reach up and press your fingers to their dusty edges. You're surrounded by tall grass that whispers red dust that clings to your ankles and a hush that says the world is holding its breath. Somewhere nearby, someone is preparing a small fire, and the scent of burning eucalyptus is already curling through the cool night air. You're not in a hospital. You're not even on a paved road. You're in the highlands of Madagascar, where birth is not just biology. It's a sacred, stubborn, sometimes chaotic dance between the physical and the spiritual. There's no epidural, no fetal monitor, no fluorescent lighting. There is, however, a rock, a very old one, set in the center of a hut, like an altar. People say it listens, and tonight you're going to learn why. You probably won't survive this. Of course, not the childbirth, not the mosquitoes, not the deeply committed rooster who starts yelling at 3:43 every single morning. But hey, it's not your birth we're worried about. You're just here to watch, to listen, to feel the centuries pressing against your skin like steam. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just outside the woven grass walls of a circular hut, watching the shadows inside move slow and deliberate. There's a kind of calm here that only exists where time is measured in breath, not minutes. The air smells like tamarind and smoke. You step barefoot across the threshold. The floor is swept clean and packed hard. In the middle lies a broad flat stone, smooth as river glass, darkened by years of oil and hands and heat. This is no ordinary rock. In this village, they call it Vatolahi Mitni, the stone that speaks. Not because it literally talks, although one midwife swears she heard it hum once during an especially stubborn breech birth, but because it holds memory, history. It's the anchor around which women gather to do the oldest thing in the world, help other women bring new life into it. Your eyes adjust. There are bundles of dried herbs hung overhead, small clay jars, and woven mats rolled and tied with ribboned bark. A gourd full of water stands near the entrance, and beside it, a bowl of red paste made from crushed roots. Everything here has a purpose, even if that purpose isn't immediately obvious. You're not alone. 3 women sit around the stone. Their hands are busy folding linen, grinding herbs, weaving a small charm out of palm fibers. They don't look up right away. The work is slow and steady, but when one does glance toward you, her face creases into something between amusement and welcome. You've seen that look before. It says, "You're not from here, are you? But you're trying." They let you stay. That's no small thing. You kneel, the ground still warm beneath you. One of the midwives, her hair plaited into silver-threaded braids, her ears heavy with carved bone, places a piece of cloth on your lap. It smells like rain. A small gesture, but a clear one. You're part of this now, in whatever small way they'll allow. And as you sit there listening to the quiet shuffling of hands and the low murmur of evening wind through palm leaves, something becomes clear. This place isn't about spectacle. It's about stewardship. A child might arrive here tonight or not. That's up to the mother and the stone, and maybe the ancestors, depending on who you ask. But whether labor begins now or next week, the stone remains, waiting, like it always has. Here's your historical fact for this section. Across much of Madagascar, before the influence of colonial medical systems, birth took place not in hospitals, but in birthing huts, tied to family lineage and community roles. The practice of midwifery was hereditary, often passed from grandmother to granddaughter, and many of these spaces centered around a sacred stone, believed to absorb and sometimes redirect pain. The fringe tidbit: some elders claim the stone must be fed every new moon, with drops of waterflower petals or bits of salt. Otherwise, it forgets how to listen. Historians still argue whether these stones were symbolic, medicinally heated tools, or if they truly held metaphysical weight in the eyes of villagers. Some say they were just warm surfaces for comfort. Others say they were portals, thin places between this world and the next. You're not here to argue. You're here to feel, and the feeling is safe. The sky outside has gone from lavender to velvet. A young girl passes the doorway barefoot humming. Inside, a tiny oil lamp flickers. One of the midwives murmurs something in a language you don't recognize, and the others nod. Their hands never stop moving. You feel the hush settle into your bones. This is the beginning, the first breath of a long, slow story told in chants and charcoal in pain, and poetry in life and labor, and you're right where you need to be. So stay here. Let the night wrap around your shoulders like a shawl woven of wind and old wisdom. And listen, the night deepens, and with it, so does the rhythm of this place. You can feel it in your spine, the slow inhale and exhale of a community that's learned how to sit still long enough to listen, not just to each other, but to the world around them. The crickets have started up their nightly orchestra. Somewhere beyond the huts, a zebu bell jingles as the animal shifts in sleep. And closer now, footsteps, not hurried, not alarmed, just purposeful. A woman enters the hut, her hand resting lightly on her round belly, her eyes calm but watchful. She's not in labor yet, not really, but the signs are here. A tightening around the mouth, a readiness in her breath. She nods to the midwives and they nod back. No one speaks. No one has to. You shift slightly, trying not to make noise. The air has changed, hasn't it? Denser now, filled with that invisible energy that gathers just before something begins. The expectant mother sits beside the stone. One midwife hands her a cloth soaked in warm herbal water. She presses it to her lips and closes her eyes. This is not a rush to the hospital moment. This is a wait and watch. Because in Malagasy tradition, birth is not an emergency. It's a threshold, a negotiation. You don't push through it, you walk with it, even if that walk takes hours or days. The Vatalahi stone rests in the center, still and silent. The pregnant woman places both palms flat on its surface. A breath passes, then another, and then the work begins. But not the physical kind, not yet. The spiritual work. One midwife begins to hum, low steady, almost like a lullaby. The others join in, weaving their voices together like vines. There are no words you recognize, but the meaning comes through anyway. You are safe. You are strong. You are held. This is one of the oldest rituals in these highlands, called Mananaka Vatolahi. It's a way to call on the ancestors for guidance and protection. The stone is the bridge. The midwives are the chorus. The laboring mother, she, is both supplicant and sacred traveler. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In traditional Malagasy belief systems, especially among the Merina and Betsileo peoples, childbirth was seen as a sacred act watched over by ancestral spirits. Razana. Stones, particularly those passed through generations, were believed to carry ancestral memory. And midwives were trained not just in physical techniques, but in the subtle signs of spiritual imbalance. The quirky tidbit: one region believed that if a baby kicked too strongly in the womb, it meant the ancestors were arguing about which spirit would get to accompany the child into the world. The solution: a quiet chat with the Vatalahi stone at midnight and a pinch of powdered tamarind root placed on the mother's tongue. Historians still argue whether these rituals were functional, meant to calm nerves and ease tension, or deeply religious expressions of a community's bond with the unseen. Some say it was all symbolic. Others insist the results were measurable in fewer complications and calmer births. You don't have a measuring stick right now, just a feeling. And the feeling is, this matters. You glance at the woman's face, her brow still smooth, her breathing steady. She is not alone in this. Not just because of the midwives, but because of the stone, the songs, the air itself. Outside, the moon has crested. Its pale light drapes over the thatched roofs and makes the red dust shimmer faintly like embers left behind by day. One of the midwives steps outside to stoke a fire, and the glow flickers against the walls like dancing spirits. Inside, they continue to prepare. A jar of honey is uncorked. Strips of bark are unrolled. A worn leather pouch is opened to reveal a sliver of polished bone, used, you're told, to gently scrape the soles of the feet if labor stalls. Not to hurt, just to awaken. To remind the body what it's here to do. The expectant mother laughs softly at something one of the women says. It's not tense laughter. It's the kind that says, "I trust you." You imagine trying to explain this to a textbook. Midwives consulted a warm stone while singing to the ancestors and applying tamarind paste to appease fetal energy. Doesn't quite fit into a chart, does it? But maybe that's the point. Not everything sacred has a column. Not every truth needs a footnote. You sit a little straighter. The warmth from the fire seeps in. You catch the faint scent of Ravinsara leaves being crushed. It smells like sharp mint and memory. They place the leaves into a small bowl with water. The mixture will be used later, dabbed gently on the temples behind the ears and across the belly. It's not just for pain. It's for presence, to help the mother stay here, not lost in fear or fatigue. And now the stone is warm again. Someone poured water over it earlier and left it near the fire. The mother places her hands there once more, and the hum of the room seems to deepen. You're not sure what time it is. You stopped caring. All that matters is this circle, the breath shared, the story beginning, because that's what this is. Not just a birth, a story, one that began long before this night and will continue long after through lullabies and family jokes, and maybe one day another young girl pressing her hand to the same stone and saying, "Tell me what to do." You watch as the fire dims slightly and the lullaby begins again, softer, now slower. The rhythm of breath, of trust, of old wisdom carried like heat in stone. And, deep down in that sleepy part of your brain that's starting to float, you're exactly where you need to be. Right here, on the edge of something sacred, watching the stars and waiting for the first sign of dawn. Outside, the crickets haven't missed a beat. Their steady chirp is the percussion beneath this night's melody. And if you listen long enough, you can almost convince yourself the stars are pulsing in rhythm. The village sleeps mostly, but not this hut. Not tonight. Inside time stretches like tree bark in the sun, slow crackling, rich with scent. The midwives move in a dance that's older than memory. They don't speak much. When they do, it's in short phrases, soft like moss underfoot. One woman hums a little lullaby, not for the baby yet, but for the room, the stone, the air itself. You lean back, feeling the earth firm beneath you, and let your eyes wander to the small shrine near the back wall. It's simple, a woven cloth, a few carved figures, a cluster of dried herbs. Above it hangs a circular disc, flat stone etched with a spiral. The spiral points inward, always inward. This is where the Hazomanga used to stand, the sacred staff, or post that marked the connection between the ancestors and the living. In modern times, the staff may be gone, but the connection remains repurposed, etched into stone and song. One of the midwives begins to prepare the Ronano Amandrano, literally milk and water. It's not dairy. It's a mix of rice water and crushed medicinal bark, used to soothe the stomach and ease early contractions. It's thick, almost like porridge, and smells of cinnamon and soil. The expectant mother takes a sip, then another. Then, without ceremony, the contractions begin. Not loud, not dramatic, just a shift in her breath, a closing of the eyes, a hand tightening gently on the stone's curved edge. The midwives notice immediately. One takes her pulse with 2 fingers against the wrist. Another places a hand low on her belly, whispering something that sounds like praise. Not encouragement, not instructions. Praise, because this is power, and it is sacred. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many Malagasy communities, midwifery was not a fallback profession. It was a vocation. The training was informal but intense, passed from elder to apprentice through years of observation, ritual participation, and eventually solo births under the watch of the reigning Ina Ampavalona, the master midwife. These women held spiritual and social authority, often equal to village elders. your quirky tidbit tonight. Some midwives would whisper to the baby directly through the mother's belly. Not sweet words, but questions. Are you ready? Do you remember your name? This wasn't superstition. It was a belief that the unborn could hear, understand, and even choose their moment of arrival. Historians still argue whether these practices were more symbolic or practical, whether the rituals served as real psychological preparation or simply dressed the unpredictability of childbirth in more comforting clothes. But no one denies the effect lower maternal stress, closer communal bonds, and birth framed as something shared, not suffered. You see it now. The midwives aren't watching the clock. They're watching her. Every breath, every shift in posture. One woman sits directly behind her, now her arms forming a cradle to support the mother's spine. Another applies warm oil to her feet, gently pressing her thumbs into pressure points along the arch and heel. You imagine trying to explain this part to a pharmaceutical rep. So tell me again what the oil's for remembering that she's not alone. Oh, right. You glance over at the vatolahi again. It hasn't moved. Of course it hasn't. But it feels different. Like it's full now, warmed not just by the fire, but by the moment. The mother keeps one hand on it between contractions, like a tether, or maybe a vow. She shifts, breathes. There's no screaming, no Hollywood drama, just a rising intensity in the room, like the tension before a thunderstorm. It's electric, reverent. Her jaw tightens, and one midwife leans in and begins a chant, low, repetitive, like a heartbeat sung aloud. The mother nods. The chant continues. You almost don't notice the small dish placed near the stone, a circle of white chalk dust drawn around 3 tiny black seeds. A prayer offering, a warding gesture, both. The seeds are from a tree called Hazo Malani, believed to ward off malevolent spirits and bring clarity. They aren't touched, just seen, witnessed. A quiet kind of magic. You close your eyes for a moment, just to listen, to breathe with her. The contractions are stronger now. You can hear it in her breath, a deeper note, a steadying rhythm. She sways forward, then back. One of the midwives presses a warm cloth to her lower back. Another begins to hum again. The stone, the hands, the breath, they are in sync. This is labor as a village act, as a story retold every few weeks in homes, just like this across the highlands and coasts. There are no monitors, no beeping machines. But make no mistake, this room is full of data. The color of her lips, the scent of her sweat, the way her feet flex against the mat. Every detail noted, remembered, respected. You wonder how many babies this stone has seen, how many mothers have pressed their palms to its warm curve and whispered fears into its silent shape. How many generations passed through this same ritual, carrying names, hopes, and breath from womb to world. The contraction passes. She exhales. Long, clear. The midwives smile. They know what comes next. Outside, dawn is still far off, but you can feel it moving closer, a thread of silver hiding behind the dark. The crickets pause for a moment, as if to listen, and inside the hut, beneath the firelight, a mother breathes deep. Not afraid, not alone. Held. You shift again quietly as the midwives prepare a new cloth, a bowl of salted water, a comb to place near her head, an old trick, they say, for easing the passage, pulling pain out through the hairline. Another contraction builds, and you're still here, witnessing, softly, slowly, letting this moment unfold like the ancient story it is. The next contraction comes like a wave, but not one that crashes, more like one that rises slowly, humming beneath the surface before lifting everything in the room, just a few inches off the ground. The mother leans forward into it, gripping the edge of a low wooden stool placed in front of her. The stool has carvings, not elaborate ones, but smooth, worn patterns. You can't quite make out marks of many hands, many births. You wonder how many of these tools, the stool, the cloths, the stone, even the chants, have passed silently from generation to generation without ever being named as equipment. They're not technology in the way we usually define it, but they are tools. Elegant, effective, embedded with knowledge. The midwife on the left begins massaging the woman's lower back with oil again, fingers working with the rhythm of the contractions. The other midwife moves to the foot of the mat, placing a fresh palmful of warm herbs near the woman's thighs, so the steam curls upward in a soft aromatic cloud. Tonight's mainstream historical fact is this. Across Madagascar, traditional midwifery techniques incorporated steam not just for pain relief, but for its symbolic role as a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. Steam-like breath was considered sacred, an offering to the ancestors, and a cleanser for unseen forces that might affect the birth. Tonight's quirky tidbit. Some Malagasy birth traditions included placing an open book of poetry or prayer near the birthing space, not to be read, but simply to lend word energy to the moment. Even illiterate families might open a family Bible to a random page, believing that the presence of words, any words, could help align the baby's path into the world. Historians still argue whether these gestures were spiritual superstitious or psychological tools to soothe anxiety and bring symbolic order to a deeply chaotic experience. But does it matter you feel the calm they bring? And so does the mother whose breathing now deepens into that final rhythm, the one that comes just before arrival. A third midwife has joined older than the others. She doesn't speak. She just kneels beside the woman, places a hand gently over hers, and closes her eyes. You can feel her listening, not with ears, but with presence. The kind of listening that makes you aware of everything else that's not being said. And then almost imperceptibly, the energy in the hut changes. It's like a gate opening. The woman's voice changes, not louder, but lower, vibrating through her chest and into the floor. She is swaying again, and the midwives sway with her almost like leaves moving in the same wind. Someone chants. Someone hums. Someone whispers the name they think the baby already knows. You realize now that this birth isn't being directed. It's being received. The mother bears down. The world narrows. Her fingers wrap around the midwife's wrist, like a vine curling around a tree. And then, a pause. Not silence, but that kind of deep hush you get before something sacred appears. And in the next moment there's a sound. Small, wet, alive. The newborn's cry splits the air with the softest thunder. Not a wail, just a bright, sharp exclamation, like punctuation at the end of a long, holy sentence. And the midwives move, not fast, but surely. They don't rush to clean or cut. Instead, the oldest midwife holds the child in both hands, lifts her up just high enough to greet the sky, and whispers a single line. You can't catch the words, but you don't need to. It's a welcome, a recognition, a promise. Then the baby is placed gently on the mother's chest skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. And the vatulahi, the sacred stone, is touched again, just lightly. One finger, as if to close the circuit. The air shifts. The steam rises. The crickets begin again outside. A rooster crows early offbeat, confused by the timing, but welcome anyway. And inside, the child is here. The midwives work in quiet tandem now. They tie the cord with a thread dyed from ravinala, the traveler's palm, and cut it with a sliver of heated bamboo. No plastic clamps, no scissors, just tradition honed by centuries of trial, error, and reverence. They wipe the baby down with warm cloths. Wrap her in a square of linen infused with crushed lemongrass. Her hair is damp, curling tightly over her crown like a question mark. Her hands are fists. Her eyes are shut tight, but her mouth forms a perfect O. The mother is crying now, not in pain, just full. The way the sky gets full before it rains. One of the midwives pours water over her feet and sings something that sounds like a nursery rhyme, but with ancient bones. The water flows into a clay basin at the foot of the mat. It will be poured out at sunrise into the garden, with a blessing whispered over the soil. You sit quietly, unsure where to look. At the baby, at the mother, at the steam curling like silver ribbon into the rafters, or at the stone which hasn't moved, hasn't changed, and yet feels transformed. You glance toward the doorway, where the first soft light of morning edges into the dark, and it hits you. You just witnessed a story that will never be written down. Not fully, not accurately, because this isn't the kind of knowledge you store in books. It's the kind you carry, in muscle, in memory, in the hush that follows a new cry. You lie back finally and let the air settle over your skin. The warmth, the rhythm, the quiet. You'll carry this night in your breath for a long time, maybe forever. And the stone. It'll be here tomorrow, and the day after. And one day when the baby now sleeping on her mother's chest becomes a mother herself, she'll press her palm to that same curve. And remember, you stretch your legs as the sun peeks in through the slatted walls, a filtered kind of light that dapples everything it touches. Floor faces, blankets bowls. The air smells faintly of lemon leaves and warm cloth, and there's a hush in the hut now. Not the urgent quiet of labor, but the satisfied kind. The kind that says, we made it. Outside, birds are waking up. Somewhere in the distance, a wooden pestle meets a mortar someone's grinding grain for breakfast. But here, in this little birthing hut, the world is still held in that rare suspension between effort and celebration. The baby stirs. She's wrapped now tight and secure and lying beside her mother who's half asleep, but holding on. Not gripping, just touching. Skin against skin, like she's anchoring them both to this new version of reality. One of the midwives, the eldest, again pours a ladle of cool water into a shallow dish and places it near the doorway. It's symbolic a way of saying thank you to the spirits, to the ancestors, to anyone who helped from the unseen side. It's also practical. Guests will dip their fingers in it before entering, cleansing themselves, before stepping into a space newly made sacred. Your mainstream historical fact here: in many regions of Madagascar, birth huts were considered temporarily sacred for up to 3 days after delivery. During that time, only specific people, midwives, blood relatives, spiritual guardians were allowed to enter, and even then with care. No sharp objects were permitted, no arguments, no illness, only healing rest and bonding, your fringe or quirky tidbit. Some families, especially in the highlands, would hang small woven talismans made of dried rice stalks above the entrance of a birth hut. These weren't for decoration. They were thought to deter jealous spirits who might try to interrupt the newborn's peaceful arrival. The stalks were often knotted into intricate loops, like tiny golden spirals. Historians still argue whether this practice originated with indigenous animist beliefs or was influenced by imported religious traditions. But whatever its root, it persisted. And some rural villages still quietly tie those loops today. Back inside, the midwives are already working again. The birthing space is gently tidied, linens rinsed, tools wiped down, herbal pouches rewrapped and hung beside the doorway to dry. The sacred stone, the vatalashi, is returned to its low pedestal, kissed by the midwife's fingers one last time before she covers it with a soft cloth of woven raffia. It's not a pedestal in the dramatic sense, just a short mound of earth, ringed with river pebbles and covered in palm fronds. But it carries weight. Not physical necessarily, but something else. You feel it as you walk past, as if the air near it is slightly warmer or maybe just heavier with meaning. The mother is sitting up now, sipping warm broth from a wooden bowl. A mix of chicken rice ginger and a root you don't recognize. It smells incredible, nourishing in every direction. You realize then that food is part of the ritual too. The first post-birth meal is carefully chosen. Not too spicy, not too salty, not too cold. It must warm the stomach and the heart, must restore what was given, and just as important, it must be shared. One of the younger midwives brings you a bowl as well. You blink surprised, but no one else is. You're here. You witnessed. You're part of it now. So you take a sip, and it's perfect. Salty sweet, earthy, quietly spicy, like memory in broth form. You close your eyes and let the warmth fill the spaces where tension used to sit. You glance toward the baby again. She's blinking now, big dark eyes searching the blurry edges of a world she's only just met. And the midwife leans close, humming a tune so low you barely hear it, more of a vibration than a melody. But the baby reacts, eyes narrowing, shoulders relaxing. This lullaby isn't for show. It's a kind of medicine. Music is transition, song is breath. It's not recorded anywhere, this tune. No one wrote it down, but it's been sung here before. And it'll be sung again, because birth is a cycle, not a one-time event. The mother hums now too. Her voice joins the midwife's, not quite in harmony, but in intention. And that's enough. The baby sleeps again, and time begins to stretch. This next part isn't dramatic. It's tender, slow. A domestic hush after cosmic upheaval. One midwife braids the mother's hair, not tightly, just enough to pull it back from her face. Another washes the cloths with boiled water behind the hut, her movements deliberate, unhurried. No one is rushing, because nothing in this moment demands speed. Outside, a neighbor arrives with a bundle wrapped in bark cloth. You peek inside, it's roasted cassava and banana baked in ash. She sets it down silently, touches the mother's foot briefly in greeting, and leaves. Another woman drops off a small carved flute, a gift for the baby. A third brings a candle stub, beeswax, and soot smudged. Each gift is small, symbolic, some practical, some poetic, but all speak the same thing. You're seen. You're loved. You're not alone. You step outside. The sun has climbed. The village is waking up fully now. Children chasing chickens. Someone splitting wood. The sound of a mortar and pestle somewhere in the rhythm of the day. You find a spot near the door and sit, watching steam rise from the broth bowl in your hand, curling like everything else in this place. Slow, deliberate, meaningful. And you feel something shift in you, something soft and ancient and hard to name. Maybe it's gratitude. Maybe it's awe. Maybe it's just the realization that not all knowledge comes from books. Some of it rises from warm earth, from ancestral song, from hands that have caught more lives than they've counted. And you sit with that, long enough for it to settle into your bones, like breath, like steam, like story. Later, when the midday heat begins to thicken the air, and the shadows shrink beneath the woven roof eaves, you notice something small but unmistakable: preparation. The midwives, without saying much, are readying the hut again. Not for another birth, no. This time for the naming and greeting. It won't happen today, but still things must be set in motion. Because in Madagascar, especially in certain highland and coastal regions, the naming of a newborn is just about choosing something that sounds pretty or carries a family legacy. It's an act of ceremony, of negotiation, of listening. Yes, listening. Because sometimes names aren't simply given, they're received. Hey, there's your mainstream historical fact. In traditional Malagasy culture, naming a child often involved consultation with unbiased spiritual advisors who used astrology, ancestral invocation, or even divination stones to determine a name that harmonized with the child's essence and destiny. And here's the quirky bit. In some regions, a baby's first sneeze was believed to hold clues about their future timing, volume, even direction. If a child sneezed loudly while being bathed, it could indicate leadership. A quiet sneeze during sleep. Maybe a gifted listener. A double sneeze. Well, that was just good luck. Historians still argue whether these sneeze interpretations were symbolic, rooted in deeper belief systems, or whether they just gave sleep-deprived parents something fun to latch onto in those foggy early days. Either way, the tradition lingered. Back in the hut, you see a collection of objects arranged on a reed mat near the hearth. A smooth oval stone, a carved wooden figure, a tiny bowl of ash. These aren't toys, they're tools. Each one will be used to read the baby. Not in a creepy fortune teller way. Think of it more like tuning in. The elders will observe how the baby reacts to each item, which she gazes at longest, what she tries to touch, whether she flinches, reaches, or blinks. Because for the Malagasy midwives and elders, a newborn isn't a blank slate. She's a reunion, a return of something ancient. A thread from the past looped gently into the present. And the right name isn't about preference, it's about resonance. Outside, you hear a low chant begin. It's coming from the grandmother's house just across the path. She's seated in a doorway with a string of coral beads in her lap, each one touched to her lips, as she murmurs something soft and low. She's asking the ancestors for guidance. That's not poetic fluff, that's literal. In traditional Malagasy cosmology, ancestors aren't simply remembered, they're active, present, involved. And when a new life enters the family, they must be consulted. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Because they've seen this before. They know what it means to raise someone through storms and sunlight. The wind rustles again, lifting the palm leaves above your head. The hut smells of lemongrass and smoke, and something slightly metallic maybe from the red dust that coats the earth outside. And you sit with the idea that a name could carry weight, not burden, but direction. You remember your own name, how quickly it's said, how often it's typed. But here, a name is a commitment. Once given, it's spoken with intention, whispered in lullabies, carved into doorposts, called out to the stars in times of sickness, sung into the soil during funerals. That's not superstition, that's continuity. You shift your gaze to the baby again. She's resting in her mother's lap, eyes fluttering beneath tiny lids, her fists still clenched, like she brought something with her, some invisible gift the world hasn't unpacked yet. One of the midwives sets a clay bowl beside the naming stones. It's filled with rice grains soaked in rose water. Later, some of those grains will be used in the ritual meal that follows the naming. But for now, they'll be scattered across the mat, tiny signs, waiting to be stepped over or ignored or tasted by accident. Every reaction is a kicker message. Not a prophecy exactly, but a whisper. You're told gently that no one will use the baby's name out loud until the ritual is complete. She'll be addressed with affectionate nicknames, soft syllables, or simply child. Not because people don't want to name her, but because naming is sacred. Because saying someone's name before the ancestors approve is like opening a gate too early. It lets in noise, distraction, even confusion. You sip from your water again. Let that settle. Let that reshape what you thought you knew about names. There's movement again in the hut. A cousin enters with a cloth-wrapped parcel. She unwraps it carefully, revealing a small square of bark cloth stitched at the edges with blue thread. Inside are slivers of bone, smoothed flat. These are ancestral markers passed down, laid beside the sacred stone for reference, not just because, but so that the new child might remember something important. Some thread she's meant to follow, some echo of who she's been before. You don't speak. No one really does. But the space is full, with meaning, with listening, with a kind of sacred waiting you rarely experience anywhere else. And in that hush, you start to realize this isn't a single story. It's many stories stacked like stones, layered like leaves. Stories told in rice grains, in braids, in lullabies. In the careful way someone picks up a sleeping child, presses her to their chest, and whispers a name the rest of the world isn't allowed to hear yet. But soon, soon. And when it comes, it will be like rain after a long dry season, or the first note of a song you didn't know you remembered. And you'll feel it, like warmth along your spine, like recognition in your bones. Because some names, they arrive not just to be spoken, but to be known. The sky outside is deepening now, shifting from the golden haze of afternoon into the soft mauve that only really exists for a few moments between sunset and true dusk. The chickens have stopped their gossiping in the yard. The cooking fires are lit. And inside the hut, a hush settles again. Not the sterile quiet of awkwardness, this is the reverent kind. Like something sacred is tiptoeing through the doorway. It's almost time. Not for the full naming, not yet, but for the testing. You've probably never seen anything like it. You sit cross-legged just behind the circle of woven mats where the midwives and elders have gathered. The baby is placed gently in the center naked, except for a soft strip of cloth at her waist. Her eyes are open now, bright and blinking like she knows something's up. She does. You can feel it. Tonight, the sacred stones will speak. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Among some Malagasy tribes, notably, the Antemoro and Betsileo midwives and elders conducted early life, fomba or ceremonial tests, using objects and omens to gauge a child's disposition. Sacred stones, vato, masina, played a key role. These weren't gemstones or polished jewels. Often they were dull and plain-looking, passed down through generations. But to the community, they were vessels, memory carriers, and they held weight. Literally, yes. Some were heavy as fists, others light as ash. But their power came from their history, from the hands that had held them, from the births they'd witnessed before. Tonight's stone is dark gray, almost black, with tiny white streaks that catch the lamplight like scratches on old bone. It rests in a carved wooden dish beside other offerings: a rooster feather, a sliver of horn, a dried petal, a small stone painted red with ochre. One by one, these items are placed near the baby. One by one, the baby's reactions are observed. No prodding, no prompting, just watching. When the feather is waved gently beside her, she stares, not startled, not bored, just alert. The midwife nods. That means something. What exactly, you don't know, but the midwife does. When the ochre-streaked pebble is placed beside her feet, she kicks once, then stops. Another nod, another silent conclusion. And then the sacred stone. It's held in both hands and passed across her body, not touching, hovering, like it's asking permission to be known. The baby coos softly. Then, in a moment so delicate you almost miss it, she reaches out. Her tiny fingers close around the edge of the stone, and everyone exhales. The midwife smiles. That's rare. Not wrong, not ominous, but rare. You don't know what it means, but you'll find out soon. Here's your quirky tidbit for the section in some Malagasy villages. If a baby gripped the sacred stone or let out a loud cry during the ceremony, it was taken as a sign that they might one day be a healer, a singer, or negotiator, someone who bridged worlds, someone who listens before they speak. And you feel it again, that sense that this isn't about superstition or magic. It's about language. A language of objects, gestures, instincts. One that predates any alphabet. One that speaks to parts of you that don't need translation. The baby is picked up again, cradled against the chest of her grandmother, who whispers a string of syllables into her ear. You can't hear them, but you know it's not the name. Not yet. It's something else. A seed word? A calling. Because in this culture, a name is more than a label. It's a compass. A kind of spiritual geometry that aligns a person with their ancestry, their community, and even the land itself. That brings us to our scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these rituals evolved independently in Madagascar or were influenced by Arab and Austronesian spiritual traditions, both of which had long histories of stone-based divination. Some scholars point to trade routes and migration patterns. Others insist the practice was uniquely Malagasy, born of volcanic soil and forest memory. Either way, the stone is speaking, and the people here are listening. You glance around the hut and realize something subtle. There are no clocks, no calendars, no to-do lists or birth registries, and yet everything is right on time, because timing here isn't a number, it's a rhythm. The kind you feel in your breath when someone close to you is about to say something important. The kind you notice when a lullaby slows or a pot of rice reaches that perfect quiet boil. That's how naming happens. Not suddenly, but gradually, like a mist rolling in, like a story reaching its end. The fire outside has dimmed now, casting a low amber glow across the mat. The sacred stone has been returned to its pouch. The baby is asleep, and the midwives are beginning to hum a low rising sound somewhere between a song and a murmur. They're sealing the moment, tying a knot in time, so it doesn't unravel later. You sit quietly, hands in your lap, head dipped slightly in that universal sign of respect. and you realize you've just witnessed something rare. Not dramatic, not explosive, but rare. You've seen a community pause, not for show, not for social media, but because something mattered. And that kind of pause, that's sacred. You feel the hum in your bones. You lean back against the wall, breathing in the scent of rice smoke and clay. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks once, then silence again. The baby shifts in sleep. And you watch your traveler listener close your eyes for just a second, just long enough to feel the stone's shape in your memory. Solid, unpolished, anchored, and waiting. The sky outside is ink, now a velvet sheet, stretched from horizon to horizon, with just enough stars poking through to remind you you're spinning on something impossibly old. The fire has dimmed, but the glow from the embers still pulses like a heartbeat under the matting of the hut. You're still seated, legs comfortably numb, arms folded loosely the way you do when something has quietly shifted inside you, and you don't want to move in case the feeling slips away. The stone test is over, but the night is not, because now comes the naming. Not the name on the scroll or school form, not the one whispered to government clerks. This is older, more intimate, the true name. In Madagascar, particularly among the Betsileo, Me and Ina Marinadas communities, naming a child is a layered affair. You might have a public name, a nickname, a ceremonial name, even a poetic name used only in song or mourning. But one of those, just one, is chosen by the ancestors. Or so it's believed. It's called the Anarana Masina, the sacred name. And it doesn't arrive in a rush. It must be revealed, which is exactly what tonight is for. You watch as a small wooden bowl is brought forward, smooth, shallow, and filled with water, drawn from a particular spring outside the village. Not just any water. It's said to have passed through 7 stones before being collected. The number matters. 7 is sacred. In many Malagasy traditions, 7 links the spiritual world with the physical one. 7 ancestors, 7 hills, 7 dreams, 7 breaths before sunrise. And tonight that number is echoed. 7 leaves are dropped into the water one at a time from 7 different plants. Each represents something the child might need. Resilience, joy, wisdom, memory, laughter, silence, courage. You lose track of which leaf means what, but the midwife doesn't. She knows. Each leaf swirls for a moment before sinking, and then the name begins to be spoken, not in full, not yet, but in pieces. The first syllable comes from the eldest woman present. She doesn't explain it. She just says it aloud softly, almost to herself. The second comes from the father who's been waiting outside. He enters now, barefoot, head bowed. He doesn't speak quickly. He waits. You can tell he's turning over options in his mouth, tasting them like fruit. And when he finally speaks, it's a syllable that feels round and warm like a drum tap in a quiet song. The third syllable, that one comes from the wind. Yes, you heard that right. The hut falls completely still. No one speaks, and everyone listens. To the creak of the rafters, to the rustle of the grass outside, to the low sigh of a breeze nudging through the door. And when the midwife hears something, feels something, she adds the third part of the name, a syllable that sounds like breath itself, like wind curling around a corner and realizing it's home. It's hard to explain, but it works. And just like that, the name is known, not announced, not shouted, just quietly shared. And now the baby is an individual, a spirit with a tether, a soul with a syllabic fingerprint. That brings us to tonight's mainstream historical fact. In pre-colonial Madagascar, names were not just identifiers, they were believed to be protective. A well-given name could shield a child from illness, misfortune, even bad weather. In fact, during periods of drought or disease, communities would sometimes rename a child entirely in hopes of shifting their fate. The name wasn't just about identity. It was strategy. You sip from a gourd of something warm, rice water with ginger maybe, and glance around at the faces in the hut. Everyone is still. Not frozen, not awkward, just settled, as if something heavy and invisible has finally landed. There's your quirky tidbit for this stretch. In some regions, babies who cried too much during the naming ceremony were believed to be rejecting the name. In such cases, the elders would try a different one. And yes, this meant some babies had several names in their first weeks, not because of indecision, but because they were being consulted. Naming wasn't just a gift, it was a conversation. Which brings us to the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this naming process originated in Austronesian customs, or if it was shaped by East African oral traditions that reached the island through centuries of trade and migration. There's linguistic evidence for both, and the debate continues, fueled by etymology archaeology and a healthy dose of speculation. But honestly, none of that matters in this moment. Because here right now, you've just witnessed a ritual that's never been filmed, never been published in a peer-reviewed journal, and never once apologized for that. Because it doesn't need to. It lives in repetition, in memory, in hush and firelight, and in the simple seismic act of saying a child's name for the first time. Not to call them, but to welcome them. The baby is swaddled again now, tucked into the crook of the grandmother's arm. Her breath is slow, her eyes half-lidded, but there's a curl to her mouth, a softness, as if she's heard the name and agreed with it. You lean back against the woven wall, exhale slowly, and feel something shift in your own chest. Not jealousy, not awe, something simpler, recognition. Because even though your name was likely given in a hospital room or on a certificate typed by a clerk who didn't know you, you still recognize this act. The power of being named, the power of being seen, of having people gather around and say, "You're here," and we noticed. Outside, a breeze stirs the leaves again. The fire sighs low, and you quiet, full, honored, close your eyes for just a second longer than you meant to. Because something sacred has happened, and now it's part of you too. Your eyes flutter open, not quite sure when they closed. The warmth of the hut has settled into your bones now, and the air is thick with something deeper than fire smoke. It's memory. Not yours exactly, but memory nonetheless. Collective ancestral, held by breath and passed on through stone leaf and name. The baby is asleep now, wrapped in layered cloth, dyed with crushed bark and ash. The midwife gently brushes a fingertip across the child's brow, then rises without a word and steps into the cool night. You follow, because the ritual's not done. Outside, the stars have shifted slightly, still watching, but with less urgency. The moon hangs low, almost bashful. You walk behind the midwife across a narrow path that leads toward the forest edge. The trees here feel older than the village itself, and in fact, many of them are considered kin. Because in Madagascar, especially among Sakalava and Andamoro traditions, there's a belief that certain trees are ancestral vessels, homes for spirits, witnesses to oaths, guardians of sacred rites. And tonight, one of these trees will hold the memory of the child's name. The midwife pauses beneath a broad canopied fig tree, its limbs twisted like knotted rope, its roots swallowing stone. She doesn't speak. She hums. Low, monotone, steady. Then she places a small carved stone beneath the tree's exposed roots. You recognize it, one of the birthing stones, now smoothed by use, kissed by incense, blessed by salt. She whispers the name, just once, and leaves the stone behind. That's it. You blink, expecting more, but that is more. Because now the earth remembers. Now the child's name is written not in ink, not in digital code, but in root and soil and air. That stone, warmed by hands and guarded by fig bark, is all ledger of existence. A non-verbal promise: we saw you. You arrived. You belong. Which brings us to your mainstream historical fact. Many Malagasy communities maintained oral genealogies for centuries, with trees and sacred objects serving as mnemonic anchors. These were not symbolic, they were functional, used in land disputes, succession debates, and spiritual guidance. A single tree might hold the remembered names of 6 generations, a stone beneath it, a birth certificate and baptism rolled into one. You watch as the midwife wipes her hands on a piece of cloth dyed in iron and clay. She doesn't look triumphant. She looks grounded, like someone who's just completed a sentence she didn't write but knew by heart. You ask her softly, "Why bury the name?" She replies without turning, "So it's never alone." Simple, true, and suddenly, it makes every modern naming ceremony you've ever witnessed feel just a little pale. Nothing against cake and balloons, of course, but there's something undeniable about committing a name to the living earth. As the wind rustles the branches, the midwife reaches into her satchel and pulls out a small pouch red cloth embroidered with a pattern that resembles waves or ribs. Inside, you glimpse dried herbs and what looks like tiny white seeds. She scatters a handful at the tree's base, and here comes your quirky detail for this part. In some Malagasy customs, ants are sacred messengers, believed to carry news between worlds. So these offerings, often scented with sugar or tamarind, are meant not just to nourish the tree, but to invite ants to visit, taste, and share the name's arrival with the wider spirit realm. You squint, and sure enough, a few tiny black ants begin their work almost instantly. It's small, it's holy, it's kinda beautiful. Historians still argue whether the intertwining of natural elements, trees, stones, ants, was born from indigenous Malagasy cosmology or absorbed through centuries of trade with seafaring Bantu Arab and Austronesian cultures. Some argue for independent development. Others point to symbolic overlaps with Javanese and Swahili traditions. But the truth may be simpler than scholarly footnotes. Whatever worked, stayed. And this worked. You and the midwife return to the village slowly. No one speaks. The child is still asleep. The hut still warm. The elders still gathered around the embers, not in suspense, but in celebration. Quiet celebration. The kind that doesn't need drums. The kind that comes from completion. You sit again, and someone hands you a warm bundle, wrapped in banana leaf. Inside, rice, cooked soft with coconut milk and sprinkled with a pinch of smoked salt and crushed turmeric root. It's humble, but sacred. The first meal offered to the spirits. You're told to take 3 bites, not more, not less. And when you do, you feel the weight of the evening settle. Not heavy, not light, but I'm balanced. Like something long and ancient has found a small new home in your chest. And here, under stars full of rice and reverence, you realize something. The ceremony wasn't just for the baby. It was for the community, for the midwife, for the tree, for the ants, for the ancestors, and yes, for you too. You were invited. You were part of it. And even if no one ever says your name aloud in this village, the fire remembers your warmth. The tree knows your breath. The ants tasted your silence. The stone felt your heartbeat. So now you are part of something that will be passed down, not in textbooks, but in whispers. And if you're lucky, really lucky someday, someone will ask, "Do you remember the night of the quiet naming?" And someone else, eyes half closed, will say, "Yes, there was a stone, there was rice, there was breath, and there was a name, and it mattered." The embers have nearly gone out now, glowing faintly beneath a thin veil of ash. Around you, the huts settle deeper into their quiet walls, creaking like old knees thatched roofs, breathing the coolness of night. The child is still asleep, curled into a shape older than memory, and the midwife. She's sitting by the door, staring up at the sky, her fingers idly tracing something unseen in the dirt. You stay just a moment longer in this hush, because there's one more thing, a final layer of the sacred birthstones that doesn't belong to the ritual, but to what happens after. Because in some Malagasy communities, when the child grows, when the bones strengthen and the teeth arrive, and the walking begins, those stones might be retrieved. Not to discard, not to keep as trophies, but to return them to the landscape in a different way. Sometimes the stones are ground up and scattered across garden beds. Other times, placed at the foot of a new planting tree. In a few rare cases, they're cracked open and their contents added to ritual ink used to tattoo family emblems along the ribs or spine. Yes, sacred ink. Made from memory, from stone, from birth, from breath. And here's your final mainstream historical fact among certain highland groups in central Madagascar ritual tattooing. For lineage and legacy was once linked directly to fertility rites, while French colonial law banned such practices in the early 20th century. Oral records and surviving examples still trace that ink's lineage back to birthstones' literal marks of origin. But what's fascinating is how much of it lives not in museums or official texts, but in body memory, in whispers between generations, in lullabies sung low over cradle fires. Which brings us to tonight's final quirky detail. Some Malagasy midwives, when preparing birthstones for girls, would wrap the smallest stone in shimmering beetle wings, iridescent, delicate, and durable, believing that this would help the child grow up with a strong voice and a bright future. To be heard and seen even in the shade, they'd say. And you picture that a flash of green-blue light hidden in cloth whispering destiny. Historians still argue whether these practices were deeply standardized or mostly personal. Some say the rituals followed clan-based calendars and were governed by astrological timing. Others argue each midwife held her own interpretation, shaped by dreams, plants, and signs. But that debate misses the point. Because now you know the stones weren't the thing. The intention was. The listening, the patience, the belief that something fragile could be honored into strength. And as you lie back one last time, wrapped in your blanket of knowledge and starlight, you feel the warmth of that legacy settle deep, the way memory sometimes does. You've walked through birthing huts and fig tree groves. You've knelt beside fire circles and felt ants march beneath your palms. You've heard names whispered to soil and watched the sky change shape above a sleeping child. You've learned in quiet hours how sacred doesn't need translation. It just needs attention. So now here, in the slow silence after all the learning, let's wind down together. Let the rhythm soften. Let your body unwind. Let your thoughts settle like silt in still water. Because here, in this final drift, between waking and sleep, you don't need to understand it all. You just need to remember the shape of what you've seen. A village lit by firelight. A midwife humming softly beneath a fig tree. A newborn curled in blankets, unaware of how much love was poured into their arrival. You breathe in. Let your breath match the slow rhythm of the night, long, warm, easy. You followed stories across oceans and decades. You've seen how memory lives in trees, in hands, in rice bowls, and river stones. And now you're part of it. You carry it not just as information, but as warmth, as something tucked gently under the ribs. So drift now. Let the weight of the past become a blanket. Let the names blur. Let the rituals hum behind your ears like a lullaby. You are safe, you are full, and you are remembered. Somewhere a stone beneath the roots still holds the echo of a name. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's all of ours. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.